Welcome to the Big Success Show. Today, broke millennial Erin Lowery on how to start investing to gain wealth. Made possible by our sponsor, financialfreedomtool.com.
Tips to be your best with a professor and Mary-Lynn for your big success.
Today's show is part of our special podcast series for Money Smart Week, coordinated by the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago to help individuals and families better manage their personal finances.
You know Erin Lowery from her critically acclaimed book, Broke Millennial.
And now she's back with a wonderful new book called Millennial Takes On Investing, a beginner's guide to leveling up your money.
And Broke Millennial is here to tell us more about it. Welcome to the Big Success Show, Erin.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
So your second book now, this one is for beginners for investing. How do you define a beginner?
Well, in the context of this book, it can certainly be defined a few different ways, but my goal was to have an all-encompassing book for people who just had no understanding of the stock market. And by that, I mean, even the language is very confusing. You could say a word like index fund or risk tolerance or time horizon. And if you don't know what any of those words mean, totally fine. You can read my book. And the reason I did that is there are a lot of great investing books out there, but a lot of them are kind of written under the assumption that you have this very basic level understanding of how the market works and what the language is. And frankly, not everyone does. I didn't when I started out. So that's why I wrote the book.
That's awesome. And I got to tell you, you did a great job, and a whole chapter worth terms actually in this book. So definitely, you do not have to be afraid of picking up this book and reading through it.
Something else that you mentioned, Erin, is the terms that you probably don't know if you're a beginner. And I think a lot of times that prevents people from actually learning more because they don't know the terms and they feel like an outsider and that they'll never get it.
That is absolutely true. And I even kind of tell a little jokey story at the beginning of that chapter you mentioned about the terms, where I have this very vivid memory of sitting in algebra class and just having no clue what was going on because I didn't know the language.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you throw out a term like coefficient, and I was like, I don't know what that means. So I feel like investing is exactly the same. And you don't need to know complicated theories. You don't have to be in the nitty-gritty and the weeds of all of that to have a basic understanding. But when I first tried to open a 401k, I remember getting to the page that had all of the investment options, and I'm just seeing names like Dodge & Cox, mid-cap, large-cap, small-cap. I had no clue what any of that meant, and I just clicked out. I was very overwhelmed, and I know that happens for so many other people.
Well, and I loved that story about algebra class, Erin, because I actually lived that too. I had my second day of a math class, and it's like they're talking Greek here. I mean, so the next question we have for you then is, okay, so I've kind of gotten into a little bit. You've inspired me. I want to start investing. So how do I do it? How do I know that I'm ready to start investing?
And that is such a critical question: is are you ready to start? And I believe everyone should start educating themselves, whether or not you're financially in a position to start. And the book's a great place to do that. But you do have to go through this process of what I refer to as putting on your financial oxygen mask. And obviously, this is a riff on when you fly and the flight attendant tells you to put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. Same thing with your money. Investing inherently does put risk on your money. So it is important that you're protecting yourself and you're protecting your money before you get started in investing. And I don't want to scare anyone off from investing. It's a great way to build wealth. But you need to have some other things handled first. And a couple of those things are paying off high interest debt, like credit cards, because if that's got 15 upwards of maybe even 30% interest rate, odds are you're not probably going to see those kind of returns in the market on average. So let's go ahead and get rid of that credit card debt. You want to be setting your goals. Why are you investing? What are you investing for? If you've got short-term goals, for example, I'm moving this weekend. That costs a lot of money. That's not money that I want to tied up in the stock market. So if you had short-term goals, you want to be saving for those. And speaking of saving, you want to have an emergency fund. Now, classic rule of thumb is 6 months. I think you could probably get away with 3 months saved of basic living expenses as well. Sometimes that stresses people out. It's not your current lifestyle level. It's whatever you just bare minimum need in order to keep your life going if times get tough. Have at least 3 months in an emergency savings fund before you get going on investing. Now, there's one big exception to all of the things I just said. And if you have an employer-matched retirement account or you want to be putting money into an IRA, especially if you're self-employed, start saving for retirement. That, to me, is the one exception for the rule. If you can take advantage of an employer match, do it. because a lot of people don't think of themselves as investors when they are putting money away for retirement, but you are investing.
And it's the only place where you can get free money in a sense, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and what I love, Erin has in her book for our audience, she's got a checklist of getting started, but then she's got a checklist that tells you that you're not ready, not getting started checklist. That was great. That was a great addition to the book, Erin.
Thank you. And a big part of that too is not meant to discourage anyone from learning more and, kind of moving forward in your education part, because that is a big part of the investing journey, is making sure that you're an educated investor before you even get started.
Now, when you were talking about investing, you said that big word, that big R word, risk. And it's interesting because you also have a love letter from the stock market in your book. So how are we supposed to have a love relationship with the stock market when it's kind of risky and almost like gambling?
Oh, I hate the comparison to gambling, and I discuss it in the book. And I so understand why people go there. But one of the best ways it was illustrated to me once many years ago is that when you walk into a casino and you put money down on a blackjack table, you do not own a piece of the casino. But when you buy stock in a company, you own a small piece of the company. And doing such, depending on the type of stock you own, you could have rights and you could be able to vote and you could have some level of control over the direction of the company. Now, obviously, it depends on how much you own, but shareholders get a vote and you get to have your voice heard. So that is one thing that is a critical difference between just straight up gambling and investing. The other thing, too, is there should be research behind this. There should be, looking back at data, figuring out what works best for you in your time horizon, which is just a fancy way of saying when do you need access to the money. The longer until you need access to the money for your goal, whatever your goal may be, that means you can put more risk on your money. And risk generally means investing in actual stocks. But there's other ways to be investing like bonds. Now, one thing I will say overall, and one of my favorite points from the whole book, is one of the people that I interviewed, which I feel like I need to put a big disclaimer. I do not suppose to be an investing expert. I interviewed a lot of incredibly smart people, and I like to call myself the translator. So I'm somebody who went out and did the research, and I put it into a digestible package for folks to read about. So one woman that I interviewed for the book had this great line about how when you invest your money is doing some of the heavy lifting for you in order to get you to your financial goals. But if investing just makes you feel completely nauseous, you have no risk tolerance for it, you absolutely cannot do it, it keeps you up at night, well, you know what? You don't have to. But that does mean you're going to have to save that much more. And you really need to do the math on how much you're going to have to save in order to get to your goals. And that was, I thought, a really great point.
That is a great point. And I think sometimes, well, I'll just ask you the question, is one way to do that, thinking about saving more, but also possibly thinking about retiring later?
And that is one way to do it. And that's interesting because I do feel like the FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early, has become a little bit more mainstream. And there's a lot more conversation of wanting to retire at an earlier age. And you certainly need to be investing if that's going to be part of your goal. But delaying retirement or pivoting out of maybe a job that you were working for a long time and moving more into something that you enjoy but still can generate an income is another way that in the future maybe you could be subsidizing your life, especially if you choose not to invest or not to invest aggressively. But I'm obviously on team, you should be investing.
Yes.
So what should you do when the market crashes?
Do we have a sound effect for
Well,
that?
run around and panic and scream and shout.
Well, first of all, if I knew when the recession or a recession was coming, and if I knew exactly what to do, I would be a billionaire.
Yes, that's right.
I don't have, a perfect plan, but the big thing is to not panic. And this is very tried and true advice. Again, speaking about someone else that I interviewed for the book, she actually works for one of the major brokerage firms. She's a certified financial planner. And she was telling me that back in 2008, when we went through the big recession, that she did not look at any of her statements for a full year. And the reason that she didn't look is because she knew that the way she was invested was aligned with how she could tolerate risk, was aligned with her time horizon of when she needed her money. She didn't need that money anytime soon. And she knew that looking was just going to make her feel, frankly, sick to her stomach, for one. And for two, she knew that it could cause her to panic a little and maybe even feel tempted to cash out. Now, when you cash out when the market is down, it's doing what they call locking in your losses. That means that you're guaranteeing yourself that you're cashing out when the market is actually down. Now, a lot of the times on the flip side, if you've invested in a way that is well diversified, it's a bunch of different companies, you're not putting all of your money in just one company, and you know pretty certainly that these companies are going to bounce back, or that if you're in mutual funds, this basket of companies are going to bounce back, then a lot of people keep investing, if not invest a little bit more when we're going through a recession, because essentially everything's on sale.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes back around, after the 2008 recession, we went through a bull market, which means that prices just kept going up, up, up. So people who stayed in it and kept investing made out like bandits when things turned around. People who cashed out, especially people who weren't quite sure when exactly to get back in, a lot of people lost a lot of money that way. So it's a long-winded way of me to say, if you have a plan and you've balanced your portfolio and you've gone through the work of figuring out when you need the money and what your risk tolerance is, just keep investing even when it goes down a little bit. And honestly, don't look if it's going to cause you to panic. Just don't look.
That old saying, time heals all wounds, certainly applies to the stock market, yes?
It really does. And I think a critical thing to understand is that the stock market is cyclical. For the essentially health of the stock market, there has to be highs and lows. It's going to go through these economic growth cycles. And that's one thing that I really try to drive home in the book. There's a whole chapter that's dedicated just to the history of the stock market to try to quell people's fears, just to go back through and look at, hey, here's all of these times that it has gone down, and it's gone down hard, but it still came back up. And we know that this is the pattern.
Yep.
So hopefully you can kind of look to history to help quell your fears in the present when it does go down. The other thing that I like to point out is that sometimes it gets sensationalized in the headlines about what is happening. For example, it might say, worst drop in history, 800-point drop in the Dow, worst drop in history in a single day. But contextually, that's not necessarily true, because it's higher than it's ever been in history. So an 800-point drop today may not be as bad as a 100-point drop was 100 years ago. Yep. So you really do have to put it in context.
You just keep sharing really important tidbits, I think, about the market that people just need to understand, because it's not this big, scary place once you start to get it. And speaking of which, there's new tools out which help us do that. So I want to make sure I avoid jargon here. So first, let's start with, Erin, what's a Robo Advisor? And then, am I better off getting a Robo Advisor, or should I go to an actual human being?
And that is a very hard, incredibly subjective question that ultimately comes down to the idea of value. No matter who or what you use, how are they providing value to you? And is the fee you're paying making sense for the value that you're receiving? And that's one thing to just note, in general in your financial life, but definitely when it comes to investing, is look at the fee. And even if you're just, not hiring anyone, you're doing it by yourself, there are fees on your investments, expense ratios. You want to make sure that the cost that you're paying to have the fund or to have the stock, whatever it is, isn't so high that it's eating away at your returns. But I digress from the question. The question is, first of all, what's a robo-advisor? A robo-advisor is a fancy way to say an online financial advisor. And a lot of times I think we have this misconception that no humans are involved in the process, and it's just fancy algorithms working in the background, trying to kind of time the market and figure out how to maximize our returns. Well, that's not exactly what's happening. There are algorithms. They cannot beat the market. They're not any more intuitive necessarily. So, you can't use a robo-advisor and expect that it's just magically going to fix everything for you when the market takes a tumble. You're still going to experience risk and ups and downs. But what it does is it provided, especially early on, a way for people to have more assistance than just the DIY approach. But oftentimes the cost is less than if you're going to an actual human. Now, as the robo-advisors have expanded and grown, a lot of them did add human options. So either depending on how much money you have invested, you might kind of unlock a level that gets you access to a human. Or you might be able to just call and talk to somebody if you're going through maybe some sort of panic about, hey, the market's going down, I need to speak to a human. So there are kind of this human add-on element. Now, the thing is, you probably don't have a dedicated advisor if you're working through a robo. It does depend. I don't want to unilaterally say that never happens. But if you have a human advisor, you generally have one dedicated person that you are connected to. So if things are going a little wonky in the market and you need to give somebody a call, it's somebody that you've worked with, and that's who you've worked with from the beginning. So that's going to be a bit of the difference in the experience between a robo and a human advisor. Humans are also fallible. You shouldn't go to anybody who's trying to promise or guarantee you a certain amount of returns. That really doesn't happen. But if you feel that you, for your own sanity, need to have somebody who's helping you, then yes, consider a human advisor. Just make sure that you're going to somebody who is a fiduciary, which means that they have your best interest at heart. Suitability means they just can't do anything harmful. You need to understand exactly how they get paid. If they can take any sort of a commission, you want to make sure that you understand that and see how that could actually impact your portfolio. You just want to make sure everything's above board, and it needs to be somebody that you feel comfortable with and you feel connected to. Talking about money can be a very vulnerable experience, so it shouldn't be anybody that makes you feel intimidated or makes you feel less than or makes you feel stupid. It should be somebody who really does empower you. And, shop around. You can kind of talk to a bunch of different people if you're trying to look for someone. But make sure you know how they get paid with robos and with humans. I don't think that one is necessarily unequivocally better than the other. There are pros and cons for both if that's the path that you're choosing to go down. And I think the big thing is just making sure that whatever amount of money that you're paying, you truly feel that you're getting value for that. Because as the cliche goes, $1 paid in fees today is $1 less for future you.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Coming up, Erin will give you the easiest first steps to take so you can get started on investing in your financial future today.
But first, a word from our sponsor, financialfreedomtool.com.
Do you feel doubt when making money decisions? Let the Financial Freedom Tool be your decision-making guide 24/7, 365 days a year, so you can make your next money moves with confidence. Learn more at financialfreedomtool.com.
We're talking with Erin Lowery, the broke millennial, about her new book, which is a beginner's guide to investing.
So, Erin, for the true beginners listening today, what do you recommend should be their first steps?
Well, the very first thing in terms of actually investing is to start with that education piece, because you have to start to learn the language to understand what's happening before you actually jump in and start investing, because you need to be an educated investor in order to make the right decision. But the easiest thing to do, that's a great first step to kind of make you feel empowered, is just to set those financial goals. Sit down and think to yourself, what is it that I want to be achieving financially in the short term? So I'm going to say less than 3 years. What is it that I want to be doing in the medium term? So let's say about 3 to 10. And what is it that I want to be doing 10 plus years from now? Obviously, for a lot of people, especially my millennial cohort, the long term is going to be retirement and kind of pegging an amount of years on that of when you want to retire. But sit down and set those financial goals and then start trying to assign numbers to them. How much do you need? And then that can kind of help you go into the idea of investing with this ability to kind of conceptualize, okay, I am saving and I am investing for X. And this is how much I need, and that's going to dictate everything else. It's going to dictate how much risk I'm going to take, how much I need to put in every month, and how much time I have.
So helpful. The new book from Erin Lowery is Broke Millennial Takes On Investing. Learn more at brokemillennial.com. Erin, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This was a ton of fun.
Next time, Today's Show money expert Jean Chatzky joins us to talk about her new book, Women with Money.
Until then,
here's to your big success.
Tips to be your best with the Professor and Mary-Lynn for your big success.
Find big success at biggsuccess.com.